Welcome, travelers of time and myth, to Forgotten Scrolls. Tonight, we open an ancient and sacred chapter, carved into the very memory of legends. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by the modern world, if your heart yearns for a greater purpose, or if magic seems to have vanished, this story is for you. Tonight, I will tell you about a king who was not born for the throne, yet whose destiny forever changed the course of an entire land. His name was Arthur, and his story lives on in the souls of those who still believe. Throughout this journey, you will learn how a humble young man became king by drawing an impossible sword from a stone. You will witness the creation of the mythical realm of Camelot and the nobility of the Knights of the Round Table. You will be moved by difficult decisions, forbidden loves, painful betrayals, and deeds that touch the divine. Arthur was not just a king. He was a symbol of justice, hope, and redemption in dark times. You will meet Merlin, the wise wizard, who guided with mystery and compassion. You will walk alongside Lancelot, the perfect warrior torn by love. You will discover the mystery of the Holy Grail, the pain of Mordred's betrayal, and the fall of a kingdom that seemed eternal. But beyond the swords and glory, you will uncover the lessons this legend holds for you today, about leadership, faith, courage, and humility. This story is more than a bedtime tale. It is a refuge for your soul, a whisper from the past that still holds power. As you listen, let your mind journey to mist-shrouded hills, to ancient castles, to enchanted forests. Breathe deeply, relax, and let the words lull you like a lullaby woven with dreams. So, make yourself comfortable, quiet the noise of the outside world, and allow the echo of Arthur's story to guide you. For what you are about to hear might teach you more about yourself than you imagine. Let us begin this magical journey together. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more legends that will accompany you night after night. Chapter 1. The Sword and the Stone. Many years before Camelot, England was a kingdom divided by chaos and war. Lords vied for power, and the people lived in fear. It was then that a mysterious sword appeared, plunged into a stone in the center of London. Above it, a clear message: "Whoever pulls me out shall be the rightful king of all England." No one believed it was possible. Powerful kings and knights tried one after another, without success. At that time, a humble young man named Arthur lived. He was neither noble nor wealthy, only pure of heart, living a simple life under the care of his foster father. One day, while accompanying his older brother to a tournament, he realized they had forgotten the sword. Arthur, running through the streets, desperately searched for one. It was then that he saw the solitary sword, gleaming under the sun as if waiting just for him. He approached without fear and took hold of it. Effortlessly, Arthur drew the sword from the stone. No one could believe what they had witnessed. A boy from the common folk, with no royal lineage or titles, had accomplished the impossible. At first, they thought it was a trick or a coincidence, but after several failed attempts by others, everyone understood that destiny had spoken. The sword had chosen, and Arthur, trembling, did not yet grasp the weight he had just taken into his hands. The entire country was divided. Some accepted the new king, others rejected him due to his humble origins. But over time, Arthur's nobility, his bravery, and his sense of justice began to take root in the hearts of the people. That young man whom no one knew began to be respected, not for the sword, but for the way he treated others. With each gesture, Arthur demonstrated that leadership does not come from power, but from the soul. What few knew was that everything had been secretly orchestrated by the wise Merlin. Even before Arthur's birth, Merlin had seen his destiny in the stars. He guided every step without direct intervention, like a silent beacon. Merlin knew that Arthur was destined for more than just reigning. He was called to unite men, to inspire generations, and to restore hope to a land broken by ambition and darkness. News of the new king spread like wildfire throughout England. Some warlords knelt, others prepared their swords. But Arthur did not seek to dominate, but to heal. He gathered wise counselors and listened to the people, something never seen before. His castle did not yet exist, but his reign was already beginning to shine like a dawn in the mist. The sword was just the beginning of a long and sacred path. That sword, later known as Excalibur, became a symbol of his destiny. Although he didn't know it then, Arthur had awakened ancient forces. The balance between good and evil trembled in the corners of the kingdom. Druids whispered prophecies, and the old trees in the forests seemed to bow as the young king passed. The magical world began to stir, recognizing the heir of destiny, but not everyone celebrated. In the shadows, ancient creatures stirred, and old enemies awoke from their slumber. Arthur's emergence also meant the beginning of a struggle against the forces of oblivion. Merlin, silent, watched from afar. He knew he would soon have to intervene, but he also trusted that Arthur would find his way. The king's time had begun, and there was no turning back. With each step, Arthur left behind the innocence of childhood. He was no longer the boy who helped in the kitchen or the forgotten younger brother. He was the chosen one, though he didn't fully comprehend it yet. History books are just beginning to recall what came next. But at that moment, as the sun set and the wind rustled the leaves, a new chapter had been born, one the world would never forget. And so the sword in the stone was not just a test, but a sign for all. Hope had a new name. Arthur. The legend had begun. Chapter 2. The Young King of England. Arthur was crowned in a simple but sacred ceremony. Still dressed in humble clothes, his gaze reflected a mix of fear and awe. The people surrounded him with hope, though some nobles regarded him with suspicion. Unlike other kings, Arthur did not shout orders or demand respect. He walked among the people, listened to the elders, and spoke with children. His reign began with humility and a pure heart. The royal castle did not yet exist. Arthur lived in a modest fortress with more dreams than stones. Merlin always accompanied him, guiding him with enigmatic words and silent tests. He offered no easy answers, but rather profound questions. Arthur learned to see with the eyes of the soul, to distinguish truth beyond appearances. Thus, he grew not only as a king, but as a man. The first challenges were not long in coming. Warlords refused to recognize his authority. Some marched with armies, determined to overthrow him. Arthur did not respond with blind violence, but with wisdom. He sent messengers, offered alliances, proposed just agreements. When it was necessary to fight, he did so with honor, without hatred. Little by little, his reputation grew. He was fair, brave, and true to his word. In the villages, Arthur's name began to be whispered with respect. Peasants spoke of a king who protected the weak and punished the corrupt. In taverns, stories were told of his simplicity and compassion, but Arthur was not blinded by praise. Every night he wondered if he was doing the right thing. Every decision was a burden, every victory, a greater responsibility. Merlin took him for walks through forests and cliffs, teaching him about the harmony of the world. He spoke of the cycles of the sun, the secrets of water, and the strength of silence. Arthur listened silently, absorbing every lesson. He understood that being king was not about commanding, but serving, that true strength comes not from the sword, but from a heart willing to sacrifice. During those years, Arthur formed a small group of loyal men. He chose them not for nobility or fame, but for their courage and inner nobility. Among them was Kay, his foster brother, who had accompanied him since childhood. Names like Bedivere and Gawain also emerged, who would later shine as great knights. Together they dreamed of a just kingdom, free from tyranny and selfishness. One night, amidst a storm, Arthur had a dream. He walked alone through a golden field, and a voice whispered that his destiny was greater than himself. Upon waking, he found Merlin watching him by the fire. The wise man told him that dreams are messages from the soul and that he had to prepare to build something that would last beyond his life. Then the idea of Camelot was born in Arthur. The idea of a sacred castle where justice was law and truth its shield, growing in his mind like a flame. It would not be just a fortress, but a symbol of hope. Arthur imagined it with tall towers, halls of light stone, gardens full of peace. It would be the heart of his kingdom and the home of those who believed in good. And though it did not yet exist, it already began to beat in his spirit. Years passed, and Arthur left his youth behind. His gaze was firmer, his voice deeper. He had learned to make difficult decisions and to bear pain without giving up. He was no longer the boy of the sword and the stone, but a king respected by his enemies and loved by his people. His soul remained noble, but now it was also strong as oak. Thus was born the young King of England, not by royal blood but by proven virtue, a leader guided by goodness, forged in humility, and sustained by hope. It was just the beginning of a story that still lives today in the whispers of time. Chapter 3. Merlin, the Wise Enchanter. Before Arthur was born, Merlin already walked among men as a living enigma. No one knew where he came from, but everyone felt he didn't entirely belong to this world. His deep gaze seemed to see both the past and the future, simultaneously. He lived secluded in moss-covered caves or in forests where trees whispered ancient secrets. He was feared by some, respected by others, and understood by very few. Merlin was not a wizard of fires and spectacles. His magic was subtle, linked to nature and the invisible rhythms of the universe. He could change the shape of things, speak with animals, and read in the stars. But more than a sorcerer, he was a sage, a spiritual guide. His power resided not in spells, but in his understanding of the harmony that sustains all life. He was a bridge between the human world and mystery. When Uther Pendragon, Arthur's father, sought to conquer a married queen, it was Merlin who wove the spell that made him unrecognizable. In return, he demanded the son who would be born. Thus, Arthur came under his tutelage. Merlin did not raise him as a prince, but as a boy of the common people. He knew that contact with humility would give him the strength a throne could never offer. From a young age, Arthur learned without knowing who he truly was. Merlin appeared and disappeared like the wind. Sometimes he spoke in riddles, other times he fell silent when most needed. But every word of his had purpose. Every silence was a teaching. He carried an ancient wooden staff, and his robe smelled of herbs and rain. His ageless eyes could comfort or unsettle depending on what they gazed upon. Those who knew him understood his intentions were always noble. It wasn't easy for Arthur to understand Merlin. Sometimes he craved direct answers but received parables. On other occasions, Merlin showed him confusing visions, scenes of possible futures. He taught him that time is not a line, but a river that changes its course. Arthur, though young, began to trust. He learned to read the signs of the world, to listen to silence, and to discern the invisible. Merlin also protected Arthur from enemies the young king didn't even know. Ancient creatures, shadows of the past, and forest. Spirits tried to interfere with his destiny. The wise man kept them at bay with ancient words and forgotten pacts. He never sought recognition, nor did he desire thrones or riches. His mission was to train the king who would change the course of all England. In their travels together, Merlin showed Arthur the magical corners of the kingdom. Rivers where time flowed slower, trees that spoke when their roots were touched, mountains where echoes told stories. Each experience left a mark on Arthur. He learned that the world is not limited to what is visible, that there are forces not dominated by the sword, but by respect and wisdom. Merlin also faced his own internal battles. He knew his time in the human world was limited. The forces he balanced were constantly shifting, and his presence was a delicate scale. Though unspoken, he knew that one day he would have to disappear, but he trusted that Arthur would be ready to continue without him. That was his greatest work, a king who would not need his power. Through Merlin, Arthur learned that leadership is not a privilege but a service, that a king must be the first to sacrifice and the last to abandon hope, that magic is not in spells, but in the love for truth. Every word from the sage settled deep within, like a seed destined to bloom at the precise moment. And so, Merlin was not only the king's advisor, but his spiritual father, his invisible guardian. In the heart of every decision Arthur made, there was an echo of the Wise Enchanter's teachings, an echo that would resonate for centuries. Chapter 4. The Birth of Camelot. After being proclaimed king, Arthur knew he needed more than a crown to govern with justice. He decided to found a kingdom that would reflect the ideals he had been taught: honor, equity, and wisdom. Thus was born the idea of Camelot, not just as a city, but as a symbol of hope. He chose a fertile valley surrounded by gentle hills, where the sun touched the earth tenderly. There, the heart of a legend began to be built. Camelot was not raised by force, but by the unity of wills. Artisans, peasants, wizards, dreamers, and old enemies came to help. The walls grew day by day, but so did the values that permeated the air there. In a short time, the castle rose in the center. Majestic, yet accessible. Strong, yet without ostentation. Its towers seemed to touch the sky, but its gates were always open to the people. The streets of Camelot were clean and filled with music. Fairs, public trials, and debates among wise men were held there. Every voice mattered, and every citizen was part of something greater. Merlin helped lay out the paths according to the stars and planted trees that grew faster under his care. The temples, dedicated to both the divine and the natural, harmonized faith and magic. Camelot was becoming more than just a city. It was an ideal. Over time, knights arrived from distant lands, drawn by rumors of a just court and a young king who did not believe himself superior. Along with them came cultures, languages, and customs that enriched the kingdom. Arthur received them with humility, offered them a place, and asked only one thing: loyalty to the common good. Thus, the city grew in spirit as much as in size. It was a blend of the ancient and the new, of sword and quill. The royal gardens were famous for their roses that never died, and the lakes reflected the heavens like enchanted mirrors. It was said that on clear nights, one could see the future, dancing on their waters. Children played without fear, the elders were respected, and the bards sang tirelessly. Legends were not long in emerging, because everything in Camelot seemed to have a special glow. Peace reigned, and hope became customary. The castle, with its white stone and tall windows, housed not only the king, but also his people in times of danger. Arthur did not live separated from the world, but at its center. He walked among his people, listened to their stories, and shared bread in the markets. This closeness made their love for him arise not from fear, but from gratitude. Camelot was not just his creation, it was his sincerest reflection. In the castle halls, laughter was heard, as were silences of reflection. Important decisions were made there, but stories were also told by the warmth of the fire. The walls held secrets, but also dreams. Every corner had a story, and every story nourished the city. Everything seemed to flow in balance. It was as if destiny itself had smiled upon Camelot. But even amidst the light, shadow observes. Merlin knew this. He warned Arthur that no ideal can be eternal without vigilance. That's why clear laws were established, and councils were formed to balance power. The king was not a tyrant, but a servant of the people, and the people, inspired by this, gave their best. Harmony was not a gift, it was a daily effort. Thus was born Camelot, not just as a place, but as a shared dream. It was the setting for unforgettable friendships, difficult decisions, and future glories. It was the center of the world for a brief moment, and its memory lives on centuries later. Because when a city is born of love and justice, it becomes immortal. Camelot was that, the echo of what humanity can be. And as the towers rose and hearts united, the young king looked at the horizon. He knew that the difficult part was not building, but sustaining. but he also knew that he was not alone. With Merlin, with his people, and with the promise of a better future, Arthur began the most luminous chapter of his story. The birth of Camelot was just the beginning. Chapter 5. The Round Table and its Knights. In the heart of Camelot Castle, Arthur ordered a very special table to be built. It had no head or privileged spot. It was round, a symbol of equality. All knights who sat there were considered equal in worth, voice, and vote. The idea was not just a political stroke of genius, but a profound act of humility. Arthur, though king, did not wish to be above anyone in his court of honor. The Round Table became the center of the kingdom, where decisions were made, campaigns were planned, and pacts were sealed. Each seat was reserved for a knight who demonstrated not only combat prowess, but also a pure heart. It was not enough to wield a sword. One had to be just, loyal, and compassionate. Honor was not earned with titles, but with deeds. The first to be part of the table were men Arthur had met on his travels. Brave. Individuals who had defended villagers, rescued innocents, or renounced vengeance for the sake of justice. Lancelot, Gawain, Percival, Galahad, and other names began to shine. Each had their story, their wound, and their motive. Together they formed a mirror of Camelot's soul. The oath of the Round Table was solemn: to defend the weak, to fight injustice, to respect the innocent, and not to seek personal glory. Whoever broke the oath lost their place. Loyalty was more important than victory. That's why knights often embarked on missions not to conquer, but to help. They sought monsters, but also healed villages and resolved disputes between families. The table itself seemed to have a magical quality, carved from ancient oak. It glowed with a soft light when sincerity was spoken. Some said Merlin had enchanted the wood, others that forest spirits blessed each meeting. What is certain is that around it, the wisest decisions and the bravest plans were born. It was both an object and a living symbol. The knights were not saints. Among them were pride, errors, and past wounds. But their commitment to the ideal kept them united. On many occasions they argued, but they always returned to listening to each other. They learned that true strength was not in the spear, but in the ability to forgive, to dialogue, and to keep one's word, even amidst pain. Camelot was strengthened by the Round Table. Stories of its knights crossed borders and ignited hopes in distant kingdoms. Young Tui, people dreamed of being worthy of a place at it. Foreign courts sent emissaries to learn from that circle without thrones or crowns, where all were one. It was a silent revolution, nobility based on virtue, not blood. Arthur knew that this table was his greatest legacy, more than castles or conquests. What he left to the world was a new way of governing based on justice, dialogue, and respect. Merlin, seeing the table for the first time, smiled melancholically. "Here," he said, "you forge not just a court, but an eternal legend." And he was not wrong. Every time a knight departed on a mission, he touched the edge of the table as if carrying a piece of Camelot's heart with him. And when he returned, his seat was still there, waiting for him. The absent were remembered with stories and the fallen honored with silence. Thus, the Round Table also became a temple of memory. As time passed, more knights arrived and some were lost. But the table never lost its essence. It was a beacon in times of darkness. As long as the Round Table existed, Camelot existed. And as long as Camelot lived in the hearts of men, hope would never die. Chapter 6. Excalibur, the Sword of Destiny. Excalibur was no ordinary sword. Forged, according to legends, in the eternal fires of the Isle of Avalon, its blade shone even in darkness. Some said it was indestructible, others that whoever wielded it would never be defeated in battle. But beyond its magical qualities, Excalibur represented something far deeper, the legitimacy of power and the purity of heart. Arthur did not obtain Excalibur by drawing the sword from the stone. That was another weapon, a symbol of his right to the throne. Excalibur arrived later, when the young king already governed Camelot. In a moment of doubt, Merlin led him to a hidden lake shrouded in eternal mists. There, a mystical figure emerged, the Lady of the Lake. Without speaking, she raised her arm and offered him the sword. The water did not stir, and the sky grew, clearer when Arthur took it. In that instant, he felt a change. It was not just the weight of the steel, but the weight of responsibility. Excalibur chose not for power, but for dignity. It was a weapon that responded to its owner's soul. And Arthur, in his humility and commitment, was deemed worthy by ancient forces. The sword had a special scabbard, also enchanted. Merlin warned that as long as Arthur wore it, his wounds would never be mortal. The protection came not from the blade, but from the symbol. On the battlefield, Excalibur shone like a beacon. Enemies hesitated, and allies were filled with courage. Wherever it gleamed, justice seemed to hold hope. But Excalibur was not a mere talisman. It was also a constant test. If Arthur ever succumbed to hatred, ego, or betrayal, the sword would cease to protect him. That's why the king treated it with reverence. He did not use it to impose himself, but as a last resort. It was a sword of peace that only rose when words were no longer enough. Many coveted it. Invaders, traitors, and even secret allies dreamed of seizing it, but none managed to wield it. Some even died trying. The sword recognized the rightful king and did not bend to ambition. It was loyal not to Arthur as a man, but to the ideal he represented. Excalibur's presence elevated Camelot. People believed that as long as the king held the sword, the kingdom would be protected. It was not superstition, but faith in a symbol that united everyone under a greater purpose. The enchanted steel reflected not only the sunlight, but also the hopes of a people. Over the years, Arthur used Excalibur in numerous battles. With it, he vanquished giants, halted invasions, and restored peace to fragmented lands. But he always did so with moderation. He knew that each time he wielded that sword, he was deciding the fate of human lives. Excalibur served not pride, but justice. Legend says that at the end of his reign, Arthur ordered it to be returned to the lake. He did not want it to fall into the wrong hands. Some claim to have seen the Lady of the Lake's hand rise once more, taking the sword back to the mystical depths as if she knew its time had ended. For now, Excalibur remains one of the most powerful symbols of Arthurian myth. More than a sword, it is an eternal reminder that true power is born of virtue and that destiny favors those who lead with wisdom, honor, and compassion. Chapter 7. Lancelot and the Oath of Loyalty. Lancelot was one of the bravest and most admired knights of the Round Table. From a young age, he displayed unmatched courage and a sense of honor that made him stand out among his companions. His story is marked not only by his feats in battle, but also by an oath that would define his destiny and his relationship with Arthur. When Lancelot arrived in Camelot, he was merely an unknown warrior, but he soon won everyone's respect. His loyalty to the king was absolute, and he swore to protect the kingdom with his life. This oath not only bound him to Arthur, but also to the ideals of justice and nobility that sustained the Round Table. His skill with the sword was legendary, but what truly made him great was his heart. Amidst battles, Lancelot demonstrated a compassion rarely seen in warriors. He never used violence out of pride, but to defend the innocent and maintain the peace Arthur so longed for. Despite his bravery, Lancelot faced an inner struggle. His secret love for Queen Guinevere complicated his oath of loyalty. It was an impossible love, full of tension and sacrifices. This silently guarded feeling became one of the most tragic episodes in Camelot's history. Lancelot's oath was both his strength and his condemnation. He often fought against his own desires so as not to break the king's trust. He knew that any mistake could destroy not only his honor, but also the stability of the entire kingdom. This human duality made him even more relatable and real. In the councils of the Round Table, Lancelot always championed unity and mutual respect among knights. His words inspired others to be better, to set aside rivalries and focus on the common good. He was a natural leader, though he preferred to remain in the shadows so as not to overshadow Arthur. During many campaigns, Lancelot was the king's right hand. His presence on the battlefield lifted morale and turned the tide of the fight. He was the embodiment of the ideal warrior, faithful to his principles, audacious, and always willing to sacrifice for his people. However, the shadow of his forbidden love and palace intrigues began to undermine Camelot's strength. The tension between Lancelot, Guinevere, and Arthur sowed doubts and distrust that would ultimately fracture the Round Table. His oath would be tested in unexpected and painful ways. Despite everything, Lancelot never ceased to be a symbol of loyalty and sacrifice. His life shows that even the greatest heroes face internal conflicts and difficult decisions. In his personal struggle, we find the complexity of the human being and the weight of responsibility. The story of Lancelot and his oath reminds us that true honor is not in perfection, but in the ability to remain faithful to oneself and to the values one chooses to defend. His legacy is a call to courage, loyalty, and love, even when these cost us our soul. Chapter 8. Guinevere, Queen of the Divided Heart. Guinevere was much more than King Arthur's wife. She was a woman with a complex soul and deep feelings that marked Camelot's destiny. Her beauty and grace were admired by all, but within her she harbored a conflict that would test her loyalty and love. Her story is that of a heart divided between two worlds. From the moment she arrived at court, Guinevere was a symbol of nobility and femininity. However, the rigidity of life in Camelot made her feel trapped, and her relationship with Arthur, though respectful, lacked the passion she yearned for. This void would open space for a forbidden love. Her bond with Lancelot grew in secret amid stolen glances and moments. That love was a refuge for both, an intense passion that defied norms and consequences. Guinevere lived divided between duty to her husband and the desire to be truly loved. This love triangle became the center of many tensions in Camelot. The queen struggled with her conscience and her feelings, aware that any mistake could unleash a tragedy. Her life was a constant battle between hope and fear, love and betrayal. Although she loved Arthur, Guinevere could not deny what she felt for Lancelot. Her heart became a battlefield where ideals and emotions clashed relentlessly. This internal struggle humanizes her and shows us the fragility of the human condition, even in the most powerful characters. Guinevere's story reveals that true love can be complex and painful. Her choice between duty and passion affected not only her destiny, but also the future of Camelot. She was the queen who showed that even in the noblest kingdom, the heart can be the source of the greatest weakness. Judgment and gossip in court were not long in coming. The secret relationship was discovered, sowing discord and distrust among the knights. Guinevere became the symbol of peace's fragility, and her story became a warning about the consequences of forbidden love. Despite the chaos it generated, Guinevere never lost her dignity or inner strength. Her role in history is more than that of a woman in love. It is that of a queen who faced her conflicts with courage, even if it meant sacrificing her happiness for the good of the kingdom. Her legacy is a mix of love, sacrifice, and tragedy. Guinevere is the queen of the divided heart, whose forbidden love set in motion events that would forever change the history of Camelot. Her story invites us to reflect on the complexities of love and the price of loyalty. In Camelot's memory, Guinevere remains an essential character. Her story is a reminder that even in the grandest myths, love can be the engine of the greatest joys and the deepest wounds. Her life teaches us that loving also implies accepting the consequences. Chapter 9. The Quest for the Holy Grail. The quest for the Holy Grail is one of the most emblematic and mystical episodes of the Arthurian legend. This sacred object, a symbol of purity and divine power, represented the hope of a kingdom seeking redemption and perfection. The Knights of the Round Table embarked on this adventure with faith and determination. Each knight who joined the quest did so with a different purpose, reflecting their virtues and flaws. For some, it was a test of valor. For others, a path to salvation. This mission led the protagonist to face physical and spiritual challenges, testing their souls and their faith. The Grail was neither easy to find nor to comprehend. It was shrouded in mystery, and its location remained hidden behind enigmas and signs that only the purest could decipher. Thus, the quest became as much an inner journey as an outer one, an exploration of the human essence. Lancelot, the bravest yet also the most imperfect, faced difficulties in this mission due to his internal conflicts and forbidden love. In contrast, other knights like Galahad, Lancelot's son, stood out for their purity and absolute dedication, becoming key figures in the Grail's story. The paths of the knights diverged during this adventure. Some found visions and revelations, while others succumbed to despair or pride. The quest revealed human fragility and the need for humility to reach the divine, a profound message that transcended the legend. The Grail's trials included confrontations with magical creatures, ancient riddles, and situations that demanded personal sacrifice. These experiences forged the knights' characters, transforming them and often drawing them away from the mundane life they knew in Camelot. The Grail symbolized the unattainable yet desirable ideal, a light that guided men towards spiritual perfection. Although not all managed to see or touch it, their quest inspired tales of hope and faith that endured through time. This object transcended mythology to become a universal symbol. In the end, the quest for the Holy Grail not only transformed the knights, but also mirrored Camelot's destiny. The purity and virtue needed to reach the Grail seemed to be lost amidst the impending corruption and betrayal, foreshadowing the kingdom's fall. This story is a reminder that the greatest challenges are not always fought on the battlefield, but in the heart and mind. The quest for the Holy Grail represents the eternal struggle to achieve the best of oneself, a message that still resonates today. The legend of the Grail invites us to look within ourselves and seek that divine spark that can guide us in moments of darkness. Its mystery lives on, inspiring generations to pursue dreams of light and hope. Chapter 10. The Betrayal of Mordred. Mordred is a crucial figure in the legend of King Arthur, known for being his son or nephew, and at the same time the traitor who led to the end of Camelot. His betrayal not only marked Arthur's destiny, but symbolized the fragility of power when trust is broken. Mordred's story is a mix of love, jealousy, and ambition. From a young age, Mordred displayed conflicting and defiant attitudes. Although he was raised in Arthur's court, he never fully managed to gain the king's trust or the people's affection. His resentment grew, over time, fueled by the shadow of the power he desired to obtain. The betrayal began when Mordred conspired to usurp the throne while Arthur was absent, taking advantage of the king's absence to gain followers. His actions jeopardized the kingdom's stability, generating deep divisions among Camelot's knights and nobles. This act of disloyalty was a devastating blow to Arthur, who trusted in family and his closest allies. Mordred's betrayal symbolizes how internal forces can be more dangerous than external enemies, slowly eroding the kingdom's strength. As Mordred's rebellion grew, Arthur gathered his loyal knights to face this internal threat. The tension between father and son became inevitable, foreshadowing a conflict that would be not only political, but deeply personal and tragic. The final confrontation occurred at the Battle of Camelot, where Arthur and Mordred faced each other in a combat that would decide England's fate. This duel was fierce and desperate, with both warriors suffering mortal wounds. The battle symbolized the end of a golden era and the beginning of decline. Although Arthur managed to defeat Mordred, the victory came at a high price. Mortally wounded, the king was taken to Avalon, leaving behind a fractured and vulnerable kingdom. Mordred's betrayal was the final link that dismantled the utopia Arthur had built with so much effort. Mordred represents in the legend human nature with its shadows and lights, showing that even the closest blood can turn against one. His story warns of the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition and a lack of forgiveness. Mordred's betrayal is a reminder that peace and justice require constant vigilance, for corruption can arise from the very roots of power. This part of the legend invites reflection on trust, loyalty, and the fragility of leadership. Despite the pain it caused, Mordred is an inseparable part of the Arthurian myth, being the force that precipitated the end. And paradoxically, the reason why his legend remains alive. His story is an eternal echo of human complexity and its consequences. Chapter 11: The Fall of Camelot. The fall of Camelot is one of the most tragic and emblematic moments of the Arthurian legend. After years of glory and prosperity, the kingdom built by Arthur began to crumble due to internal conflicts and betrayals. This process symbolizes the fragility of human ideals in the face of corruption and ambition. The disunity among the Knights of the Round Table was one of the main causes of the collapse. Rivalries, jealousy, and hidden secrets eroded the brotherhood that was once the pillar of Camelot. The loyalty that united the warriors slowly broke, leaving the kingdom vulnerable to internal threats. Guinevere and Lancelot played a significant role in the fall, as their forbidden love generated distrust and deep divisions. Although their story is one of passion and sacrifice, it also triggered the loss of unity and trust among the nobles. The emotional conflict had devastating political consequences. Meanwhile, Mordred continued his rebellion, taking advantage of the fractures to gain power and followers. His betrayal was not only a personal blow to Arthur, but a symbol of the disintegration of the order the king had tried to maintain. The shadow of betrayal spread over Camelot, announcing its end. Internal battles and clashes between knights became increasingly frequent, wearing down the kingdom's forces. The glory of Camelot transformed into a field of conflicts and pain, where the ideals of justice and honor seemed to vanish before the reality of human ambition. Arthur attempted to preserve his kingdom by summoning his allies and reinforcing the Round Table. But distrust was already irreversible. His authority weakened as the darkness of discord grew. The hope of a just reign became a constant struggle against the shadow of destruction. Camelot Castle, once a symbol of peace and power, began to reflect its people's agony. Its walls witnessed conspiracies, quarrels, and disillusionment. The grandeur of the place contrasted with the moral decay settling in its corridors and halls. Finally, the fall of Camelot culminated in the decisive battle where Arthur faced Mordred. Although the king emerged victorious, the wounds were fatal for both, sealing the kingdom's destiny. The defeat was not only military, but the loss of a dream, an ideal of a better world that would never be the same. The fall of Camelot is an eternal symbol of the struggle between good and evil within humanity. It reminds us that even the greatest utopias can succumb when trust is lost and discord reigns. The story invites reflection on the importance of unity and commitment to values. Thus, Camelot transitioned from a beacon of hope to a legend warning of the dangers of division and betrayal. Its fall marks the end of one era and the beginning of another, where myths transform into lessons for future generations. Chapter 12: The Last Combat. The Last. Combat between Arthur and Mordred is the climax of the legend, the definitive confrontation that would decide Camelot's destiny. In the midst of a battlefield stained by blood and despair, both warriors met face to face, aware that their actions would forever mark the kingdom's history. Arthur, with the strength of a king fighting for what he loves, wielded his sword with determination and a heart heavy with sorrow. Despite the betrayal and disillusionment, he still retained the nobility that had always defined him. His goal was not only to win, but to restore the peace and order that Mordred had tried to destroy. Mordred, for his part, was the embodiment of rebellion and limitless ambition. His fury and resentment drove him with an almost inhuman impetus, ready to destroy everything Arthur represented. This combat was both personal and symbolic, the struggle between light and shadow within Camelot's soul. The battle was fierce and prolonged, with each blow resonating like an echo of the kingdom's destiny. Knights and soldiers watched with fear and hope, knowing that the outcome would decide not only the present, but the future of all England. The tension was palpable in the air, like a storm about to break. Finally, Arthur managed to mortally wound Mordred, but not without receiving a severe wound himself. Both fell to the ground, exhausted and aware that neither would survive to see the next dawn. At that moment, Camelot's fate was sealed by the blood of its two great enemies. This last combat symbolizes the inevitable tragedy that accompanies great epics. The struggle between Arthur and Mordred was not only physical, but also a moral and spiritual battle, where the values of justice, loyalty, and betrayal clashed mercilessly. It was the end of a golden era. In the agony of battle, Arthur uttered words that resonated with both hope and sorrow. Despite the defeat and loss, his spirit remained invincible, promising that the legend of Camelot and its ideals would live on beyond death. His last breath was a legacy for future generations. The surviving knights collected their king's body and carried the wounded away from the field. Sadness and silence enveloped the place as news of the king's defeat and death spread throughout the kingdom. Camelot, once a symbol of hope, was plunged into uncertainty. The last combat was the tangible end of an era, but also the beginning of a myth that would transcend time. Throughout the centuries, the story of Arthur and Mordred has inspired countless generations to fight for their ideals, even in the face of adversity and loss. Thus, the final battle became an eternal legend, a reminder that even if heroes fall, their teachings and values can endure and guide those who seek justice and truth. Chapter 13. The Journey to Avalon. After the last combat, King Arthur's wounded body was secretly taken to Avalon, the mystical and legendary island where great heroes were said to find rest and healing. This journey marked the end of his earthly reign and the beginning of a mystery that would fuel the legend for centuries. Avalon was no ordinary place, but a realm shrouded in magical mists and protected by ancient powers. There, amidst serene lakes and eternal forests, Arthur would find refuge where his wounds could heal and his spirit rest, far from the wars and betrayals that marked his life. The most loyal knights accompanied the king on this journey, laden with sadness, but also with hope. They knew that Avalon was more than a physical place. It was a symbol of rebirth, a promise that one day Arthur would return to restore justice and peace to the kingdom. During the journey, legends about Avalon intertwined with reality. Stories were told of mysterious healers, sacred trees, and a light that guided the chosen ones towards a destiny beyond death. All of this reinforced the magic surrounding that place hidden from the mortal world. The passage to Avalon was also a spiritual journey for those who accompanied Arthur. In every moment, they felt the king's presence not only as a leader, but as an eternal symbol of hope and courage. The island became a sanctuary where the ideals of Camelot could live on, even if the physical kingdom was in ruins. Upon arriving in Avalon, Arthur was received with reverence by beings who seemed as ancient as time itself. There, surrounded by an aura of mystery, he was placed on a bed of leaves and flowers, where the healing powers of the place began to work on him, dissolving the wounds and weariness of his body. The journey was not only for Arthur, but also for his followers, who faced the difficult reality of a world without their king. The departure to Avalon symbolized the transition between legend and history, the separation between the human and the divine in collective memory. It is said that the journey to Avalon never truly ended, as many believe that Arthur remains there, asleep, waiting for the moment the kingdom needs him again. This belief has kept the flame of the legend alive, inspiring generations to seek justice and honor. Avalon, then, is not just a final destination, but a starting point for eternal hope. King Arthur's journey to this mystical island represents the possibility of rebirth, of transcending mortality, and of keeping alive the inspiration to fight for a better world. Thus concludes this stage of the story, with Arthur resting in Avalon, while his legend continues to grow, waiting for the day he returns to guide his people towards a new dawn. Chapter 14. The Legend That Never Dies. The story of King Arthur and Camelot transcends time and space, becoming a legend that never dies. Although the real facts are lost in the mists of history, his tale lives on in the imagination of people of all ages and cultures. This perennial nature is proof of its power and meaning. Each generation finds in the legend of Arthur a mirror for its own ideals and aspirations. The struggle for justice, nobility, honor, and sacrifice embodied by the king and his knights become universal symbols, capable of inspiring even in modern and distant times. Oral traditions, books, cinema, and art have kept this story alive, adapting and reimagining it, but always respecting its essence. The legend is not static. It evolves with each storyteller who revives it, keeping the magic that made it eternal intact. The figure of Arthur represents not only a king, but the ideal of the just and wise leader, capable of uniting his people and confronting darkness with courage. This ideal has become a beacon for those who seek an example of virtue and hope in history. Camelot, with its round table and its knights, symbolizes community and equality, where every voice is valued and where common justice is sought. This vision remains a model for societies that aspire to build a more equitable and supportive world. The fact that the legend never dies also lies in the promise of Arthur's return. The belief in his return keeps alive the hope that good will triumph over evil, and that at some point, justice will be fully restored in the world. This myth has crossed borders and cultures, adapting to different contexts, but always preserving its central message. Thus, the legend of King Arthur is not just an English story, but a universal heritage of humanity. The power of this legend lies in its ability to transcend reality and become an accessible ideal for everyone. The pursuit of justice, the fight against betrayal, and the importance of loyalty are eternal values that never cease to resonate in the human heart. That is why, although times change and eras pass, Arthur's name will continue to be remembered. His legend will remain alive because it speaks of something fundamental, the inextinguishable desire for a better world where honor and truth prevail. Ultimately, the legend that never dies is a testament to the power of stories to connect humanity across time, inspiring us to be better and to believe in the possibility of the extraordinary. Chapter 15. The Symbolism of King Arthur. King Arthur is much more than a historical or legendary figure. He is a symbol laden with multiple meanings that have resonated throughout the centuries. His figure embodies universal ideals such as justice, leadership, and the pursuit of the common good, making him an archetype for various cultures. The sword Excalibur, beyond being a powerful weapon, symbolizes legitimate authority and the divine power that supports a true ruler. Drawing the sword from the stone represents the sacred right and the purity necessary to govern with wisdom and justice. Camelot, Arthur's kingdom, symbolizes the ideal utopia where peace, equality, and brotherhood reign. Its round table is an emblem of democracy and equity, where all knights have a voice and vote, reflecting the aspiration for a just and collaborative society. Merlin, as mentor and guide, symbolizes ancient wisdom and the connection to the mystical and divine. His presence in the legend represents the importance of knowledge and spirituality on the path of leadership. The Knights of the Round Table, with their code of honor and bravery, embody the constant pursuit of moral excellence and the fight to protect the weak. Their commitment and sacrifice represent the ideal of service to others and to justice. Guinevere as queen symbolizes the complexity of human emotions and the dilemma between duty and the heart. Her story adds depth to the myth, showing that, even in nobility, internal conflicts and personal challenges exist. The quest for the Holy Grail represents the spiritual search and the yearning for inner perfection. This symbol transcends the material and reflects the human desire to find meaning, purity, and transcendence in life. Mordred, the traitor, symbolizes corruption, the breakdown of order, and the consequences of disloyalty. His role in the legend reminds us that even the greatest utopias are subject to internal threats. Arthur's journey to Avalon symbolizes hope and the possibility of rebirth or return in times of need. Avalon is the mythical place where death is not definitive and legend becomes a promise. In summary, the symbolism of King Arthur is a mirror where humanity can reflect its ideals, its struggles, and its hopes. His myth lives on because it offers answers and teachings that remain relevant in every era. Chapter 16. Eternal Lessons from the Myth. The myth of King Arthur offers profound lessons that transcend time and cultures, teachings that still inspire today those who seek justice, courage, and authentic leadership. His stories remind us that greatness lies not only in power, but in nobility of spirit. One of the clearest lessons is the importance of commitment to the common good. Arthur, despite his imperfections, always sought a kingdom where justice and peace were possible, showing that leadership must serve everyone, not just a few. Loyalty, as represented by the Round Table, is another fundamental teaching. Commitment to values and to the people around us strengthens any project and builds strong and resilient societies in the face of adversity. The myth also speaks to us of the balance between power and humility. Arthur was chosen to govern not for his ambition, but for his pure heart and his sense of duty, teaching us that true power arises from service and responsibility. The quest for the Holy Grail is a metaphor for the inner search for meaning and transcendence. It invites us to look beyond the material and to cultivate spirituality, integrity, and hope, essential elements for a full life. The conflict with Mordred reminds us that internal threats can be the most dangerous. Disloyalty and betrayal, even within the closest circle, can destroy what is built with so much effort, teaching us the importance of vigilance and honesty. The complicated love between Lancelot and Guinevere shows us that human emotions are complex and can test even the strongest bonds. Recognizing and facing these difficulties is part of personal and social growth. The fall of Camelot is not just a tragedy, but a warning about the fragility of human utopias. It reminds us that justice and peace require constant effort, vigilance, and sacrifice to stay alive. Arthur's final journey to Avalon symbolizes hope and rebirth. Although ideals may seem lost, there is always the possibility of recovering or reinventing them in new forms, keeping the flame of the myth alive. Finally, the myth of King Arthur invites us to be active protagonists of our own history, to fight for what is just, and to be inspired by examples of courage, honor, and wisdom to face the challenges of the present. These eternal lessons make the legend of Arthur remain relevant, not as a simple story of the past, but as a living guide for those who seek to build a better world. Chapter 17. Curiosities of Arthur's Realm. Arthur's realm is shrouded in an aura of mystery and legend that has fascinated historians, writers, and dreamers for centuries. Many of the stories surrounding Camelot and its knights have roots in oral traditions that intertwined with historical facts, pagan myths, and Christian symbols, creating a complex and fascinating mosaic. One of the most intriguing curiosities is the true location of Camelot. Although most associate it with sites in southern England like Tintagel or Winchester, there is no definitive consensus. This ambiguity has allowed the legend to remain alive, fueling the imagination and the tireless search of archaeologists and adventurers. The character of Merlin, for example, is a symbol that blends ancestral wisdom with mystical magic. It is believed that his figure was inspired by Celtic druids and Christian prophets, reflecting the cultural fusion that took place in the British Isles during the Middle Ages. Another curiosity lies in the Round Table, which not only represents equality among knights, but also the revolutionary idea of shared justice and unity. The table without a head symbolized that everyone had the same importance, an advanced concept for the time, and an ideal of coexistence that still resonates. Excalibur, the legendary sword, has several versions about its origin. In some, it is said to have been given by the Lady of the Lake. In others, simply that it was the sword Arthur pulled from the stone. This duality represents divine power and the legitimacy of leadership, reinforcing the link between the earthly and the spiritual. Lancelot, the most famous knight after Arthur, is also a figure full of paradoxes. His bravery and exceptional skills made him a hero, but his forbidden love for Queen Guinevere led him to conflicts that marked Camelot's history. This mixture of nobility and human tragedy adds depth to the legend. The Holy Grail, the sacred and spiritual quest of the knights, is perhaps one of the most powerful symbols. Although there is no single description, it has been associated with the cup of the Last Supper, the chalice of the Eucharist, or even a symbol of inner enlightenment, showing the rich interpretative nature of this tradition. Mordred, the traitor, is often seen as an inevitable figure in the narrative, a reminder that every utopia faces the shadow of discord and breakdown. His role in the fall of Camelot introduces a dramatic tension that teaches about the consequences of ambition and lack of forgiveness. The fall of Camelot is a recurring metaphor for the fragility of power and human ideals. Despite the tragedy, the myth transmits an implicit hope that even in destruction, new beginnings can emerge and the memory of noble values can endure. Finally, a little-known curiosity is that many Arthurian legends were compiled and popularized centuries after the supposed events, mainly during the Renaissance and Romanticism, moments when Europe sought to revalue its roots and create national symbols. This journey through curiosities not only enriches our understanding of the myth, but also shows how the legend of King Arthur continues to be a mirror where we reflect our own hopes, fears, and dreams. Arthur's realm is not just a place in time, but an eternal space in the human imagination.